only have about 4 slides on there.
Good.
Give you a talk.
No problem. Okay, so we're lucky enough to have Kyla Mackey here today. And Kyla, what's your title?
Clean Energy Program Director.
With the city, state?
Just nonprofit.
Nonprofit.
Environmental organization.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yep.
Okay, so I'll just let you kind of introduce yourself then. And Adam's here, Gary's here, we're recording. You've got a copy of this. Let me pull up your...
Hopefully it's in there.
removable disk, right?
Must be.
Sort by date, maybe? Is it this one?
Yep.
Okay.
That should be it.
Okay, so I'm going to just hit F5 on that, and then, whoa. Does that look correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It shows up a little darker on this, but that's okay.
And there, gosh, that was kind of weird. Let me, hang on one second. This is a new computer for me. Weird. So I F5'd. No, it wants to do that. Okay, all kinds of weird stuff's happening. Oh, you know what it did? When you go to F5, it keeps your PowerPoint on your laptop and just shoots the slideshow to the, so, anyway, why don't you just start with the camera, introduce yourself, and then we'll get you into the PowerPoint. So
Okay, all right.
You're in the hot seat.
Okay, that works.
Maybe tell us a little bit more about your background, so Gary was asking. In fact, can you drag that down so my daughter's selfies aren't showing? Just grab the top of that window and just drag it down if possible.
Right.
It's kind of tricky.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So go ahead, go like on your background, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. Well, I'm Kyla Mackey. I work for the Montana Environmental Information Center. I do all of their clean energy policy work, mostly state policy. MEIC is located in Helena, and we've been around for about 41 years, so one of the older conservation environmental organizations in the state. We have a focus on state government agencies and the state legislature. So every other year I do quite a bit of lobbying on renewable energy policy at the state legislature. And so we are in an off legislative year this year, so been a little bit less busy, but still keep busy with a lot of the issues going on at state agencies, and then a lot of the renewable energy, kind of what's happening in renewable energy policy around the state. So that's a little bit of what I do. I've been at MEIC for about 6.5 years. I do, like I said, mostly renewable energy, but then since it's a small environmental organization, I also do a little bit of work on habitat conservation and land conservation, and climate change is a big part of the work that I do, so even some federal policy and climate change work. My background, I graduated the University of Montana with a degree in wildlife biology and political science, and then I went to DC and did an internship there. Then I went to...
When you were in DC, was it part of your current position?
No, when I went to DC, I was working with the Student Conservation Association, SCA, and they have a congressional internship. They primarily do internships in national parks and kind of more on-the-ground internships. So this internship that I did was a 2-part internship that started in DC for 7 months, and then then I was placed in a national park in Alaska, in Denali National Park for a summer. So, I got the wildlife stuff in there.
Yeah, it sounds like your political and your wildlife degrees are both put to use there a lot.
Yes, yeah. And so how I got into renewable energy from that was following the internship in Alaska, I worked with the National Wildlife Federation And they have a tribal lands program, and part of that tribal lands program is renewable energy, and getting kind of small installations up on tribal lands. And so I worked closely with the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota to get wind turbine placed that mostly powered, actually 100% powered their radio station up there. And then so, and that was a pretty small application, but something that, you know, the radio station was a big part of how it's very low income area, and so that was a big part of how most of the people got their news was through the radio station. So that was really neat, and a great experience, and it got me really interested in renewable energy
This
work.
is in North Dakota.
South Dakota.
South Dakota,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, Pine Ridge. And so, but I was working out of Boulder, Colorado, and so I wasn't actually up there a lot, but was kind of handling the behind the scenes and navigating some of the policy issues. So that was great, hands-on experience. And then also so following from that, I decided that I wanted to pursue more focus on energy, and then moved back to Montana, and I got this internship with MEIC in Helena, and have been there ever since.
Nice.
And so that's kind of a little bit of my background. And so I've done quite a few internships to get to where I'm at. And energy is one of those things that's always changing, and it's always interesting. And so I don't feel, you know, like that sort of plateau that some people feel. I feel like it's always interesting. And I
tell
can
me about it. I hear you. We're trying to reinvent the low voltage world as we speak, and I'm sure, I don't know where it'll go, but we're throwing a curveball at the
Yeah, absolutely. So, anyway, so that's kind of what brought me to where I'm at. And then, so most of what I'll chat about today is just a little bit about this report that we contracted Synapse Energy Economics. They're based out of Massachusetts. They primarily focus on the regulatory arena of energy, and they put out reports, they testify at public utility commissions, and
nonprofit as well.
I believe so. I believe so. Yeah, they're an economics firm that contracts out with nonprofits and state governments to do reports on kind of the status of energy, certain energy technologies,
And
and policy.
Your organization is kind of, I mean, biased towards renewable and clean energy.
Yes,
obviously, right?
yes,
And
yes.
so is Synapse biased in that way as well?
No,
Okay.
they are not. They do a lot of contract work, honestly, with environmental organizations.
Yep.
But their real focus is, energy efficiency. That's
Okay.
kind
I
of
saw EE was one of
yeah.
the 4 bars that they were showing here.
Yeah, and so they will, they just look at the status mostly of the market and where it's at, and, they, like I said, they'll go into utility commissions as, an expert witness and discuss kind of where the market's at, the cost effectiveness of different resources.
Yep.
And so, as most economists have different points of view, and I'm sure there's kind of lean, towards renewables, but they also do reports on coal and other things too.
Sure, they
So,
have to have a baseline.
Sure.
They must compare it to the business as usual.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Just sorry to interrupt, but do you guys ever reference this Lovins text at all? Have you heard of this guy?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have that. I've read
Okay.
that book, yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah, Amory Lovins and the Rocky Mountain Institute, we use their work all the time.
So it's fairly well recognized, established text. I mean,
Yes,
I don't
yeah.
think there's any reason not to believe the numbers in there.
Oh, no.
It seems like they have a very exhaustive, research strategy and team and all that.
Right. I mean, Amory Lovins, Rocky Mountain Institute, they're the leading experts in distributed generation technology, especially.
Okay,
So,
good, good.
yeah, so this report from Synapse, we just released this a little over a month ago. And we, kind of the question that brought on this report was, where is the status of employment in renewable energy in Montana and energy efficiency as well.
Yeah.
And then kind of what's the future look like based on, current prices, current trends, Montana-specific data. And that's what we're really interested in, because a lot of these National Renewable Energy Lab studies, Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, they put together great studies, but they either aggregate it or they extrapolate for regional data. And so we really wanted a Montana-focused study, and a lot of this is because of some of the changes that we're seeing happen pretty rapidly in the energy industry in Montana, and some of that's related to policy, some of that's just related to where the market is at. Of course, the policy impacts the market, and so we were looking at, as we kind of move towards a more diverse and even transition away from coal here in the state, which coal is still about 50% of the generation in electricity generation in Montana comes from coal, and so but we're seeing kind of this move away from it, and there's several reasons for that, and can get into that. But so we wanted to say, what's the job potential if we're going to be replacing that power with more renewable sources, and then also supplementing current generation with energy efficiency as well. Mm-hmm. So that's.
50% actually sounds a little low to me.
It used to be closer to 60. Yeah. About 10 years ago, it was closer to 60. So we're seeing a significant decrease in the coal for our generation here in the state, and we generate twice as much as we consume. And the rest of it is going, or the majority of our electricity is going to load centers in Washington, Oregon, and California. And that's primarily where, and then some goes into the, more into the eastern Midwest interconnection, but most of our power is flowing west. And so what is causing a lot of the transition in terms of generation is the consumers in those states are, they're demanding or wanting cleaner sources of energy. And so you see the major owners of the Colstrip generation facility here in the state, they are utilities on the West Coast. And so their customers are saying, and their public utility commissions are saying, okay, you have these generation units that are coal-based, yeah, and we want to start to get away from, they call it coal by wire. So they know where their power is coming from, and they want cleaner sources of energy. Primarily wind is what that they're looking at initially. So that's kind of some of the context, and then there's some national context that's going on as well with EPA rules and natural gas competing right now pretty handedly with coal. So
that was my next question. That 10%. So when you went from 60 down to 50, was that 10% taken up by natural gas, or was it? Where'd that extra 10% come from?
So some of it's natural gas, and I had a great chart. Basically, in the last, generation, in the last, between 2005 and 2013, 60% of the energy that has been built in the state is come from renewable resources. Wow. So that's wind, and then to some extent smaller scale hydro. Yeah. And then the rest, and not the rest, like a third of that is from natural gas, new natural gas plants.
Natural gas generation plants built in Montana?
Yes.
Okay.
And then since 2005, one coal plant, and that's the Hardin Generating Station. It's a little bit east of Billings on a reservation, and that's about 118 megawatts. But that's, and that actually I don't believe at the time is generating, just because some financial issues with the tribe, the Crow tribe. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a great background. Yeah, one of our goals really for energy finance was to look at the history. 'Cause these are a lot of numbers that I just don't know, so that's fantastic.
And before Colstrip was built, we were primarily hydropower was our primary source of generation.
Because when Colstrip came online, though, I mean, our primary generation must have gone way up, right? You know.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm wondering if Montana, I'm surprised Montana only produces twice what it consumes. That actually seems a little low to me, but
Oh.
it is, right?
Yeah, and it based on our population, it's a little bit low. We do have some industrial facilities that, you know, are higher energy consumers.
Yeah.
So that's not all coming from residential
Sure, of
consumption, but yeah, in terms of per capita energy consumption, I think we rank 11th in the United States.
Really?
So.
And that's all energy, so that's heating.
Yeah,
the whole deal. Okay.
and so what
Driving, I'm guessing,
exactly,
yeah.
you'll see a big chunk of that is coming from transportation
Yeah.
fuels because we have long commutes, you know,
Yeah.
there's long distances between places,
Oh, yeah,
so it's not like some cities where where that consumption is coming from idling your car and sitting in traffic, it's coming from driving, you know.
Commuting to North Dakota.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I've seen that too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's, you know, that's what goes into our energy consumption, but it is, you know, one of the highest in the nation, and something
Wow.
that, and something that, you know, energy efficiency would make a big deal as far as the electric sector side of
Sure.
things goes.
Transportation too, yeah.
Transportation side too. So that's some of the context. I don't know if he wanted me to try to go into the PowerPoint at all, but do I have to click on something to do that?
Yeah.
Oops.
Maybe just view.
Did I just click out of that?
It's still on.
Oh, okay.
It's still on. And I think that's coming up on the actual screen.
Okay. Okay.
It's okay if we just get your audio too.
Okay. All right. Let me, oops. I'm now
It's got a whole bunch of stuff up.
I'll just try to see, hopefully this works if I just click on this and then it's showing up. So that's some of the context of the report. And we wanted this third-party study to look at some of the Montana numbers. And just as some of a background, they had some difficulty finding a lot of information related to energy efficiency. Energy efficiency is one of those fields that, you know, there's a lot of businesses that do it as part of their business, but they're not strictly an energy efficiency business. So HVAC and, you know, insulation, and it's a little bit more ubiquitous compared to information related to wind or solar here in the state. And so they did, as far as the energy efficiency data, they looked at some program level data for Montana. So for energy efficiency, a program, so an entire energy efficiency program that a utility might have, and then you have measure level data. So a measure level data would be things like rebates for light bulbs. And then they'd figure out the cost of that, and then and the labor related to that, and then they'd combine it. And so they had program level data, but didn't have a whole lot of measure level data. And so they went to some data from Massachusetts and relied on some of that, and I believe Minnesota. So that is one area where there was a lack of data, and that's definitely the case with energy efficiency. We see that a lot, but you know, I think if you've ever seen anything from American Council on Energy Efficiency Economy, ACEEE, they do a lot of research related to energy efficiency, cost effectiveness. They don't do as much job-related research, but they use kind of similar approaches that the Synapse study did. So I'll just kind of hit some of the high points of the report. It's pretty easy to read. It's not too dense. And so, but I just wanted to pull out a couple tables that I thought were the takeaways from this report, and maybe give you a sense of where the job potential is. And so this report does look at over the next 20 years. That's important to keep in mind because we're looking out over 20 years, and so the jobs associated with each of these fields over the next 20 years is pretty significant, especially if you're looking at changes in the industry, as I mentioned. And so this first table combines the construction and operation and maintenance jobs. Of course, as with almost every energy, technology, and industry, most of the jobs are going to be up front in the construction phase. So you have small PV with 6.8 jobs per, and it's looking at per average megawatt. And that's also important because each of these technologies, they have kind of different job factors, and so to compare them on an apples to apples basis, they looked at jobs per average megawatt. And so for solar PV, that's the highest with 6.8 jobs per average megawatt, so that's a little bit more labor intense. And then operation and maintenance jobs, those are ongoing throughout the life of the resource. And that's another point to make with energy efficiency, is that the jobs per average megawatt for operation and maintenance aren't going to be very much. Essentially, the best way to think of it is, once you install insulation into somebody's home, you don't really need a whole lot of maintenance to do that. But there are some energy efficiency jobs that do require operation and maintenance, similar to the solar PV.
How's an average megawatt defined?
So an average megawatt, the best way to think about it is you think about a megawatt hour is 1 megawatt enough to operating constantly over an hour.
Yeah.
And there's 8,760 hours in a year. And so you divide the megawatts by 8,760 to get an average megawatt. That's if it's operating at 100% capacity factor.
I just haven't seen that terminology on average megawatt.
Yeah, and I read it either way. Megawatt hour is probably the most common that you'll see, especially I have a couple of charts on cost, and cost is definitely defined over a megawatt hour, but I think it's easier for jobs to look at an average megawatt.
I mean, there might even be a way to define it per maximum megawatt.
Yeah.
Because I'm guessing if you get there's times when you might actually have to call people in to run this equipment if there's a lot of power. But this is, I think, on average, sometimes it's low, sometimes it's high, but
Yeah,
the annual average.
the annual average. And
Okay.
and this chart, another thing to point out is that construction and operation maintenance jobs, their factors are going to be different than each other. So for construction, they define it in job years, because a construction job isn't ongoing, and so they're going to define that in job years. And so this is looking out over 20 years, and during both the construction phase and operation and maintenance phase for each of these resources.
Okay, so here's my next question. So does that mean that, so 6.8 job years means that there are about 7 construction jobs in solar PV?
Per average megawatt.
Per average
Yeah.
megawatt? Okay,
Yeah.
good, okay, good.
Yeah.
So if you got a megawatt of power, you need 7 people out there doing construction.
Yeah, that's the best way that I can think of it.
That's pretty good. Okay, so sorry, I gotta just keep mathing it out a little bit. So,
But a megawatt of solar PV is a lot.
yeah.
Maybe we'll get the cap up to megawatt this year.
Yeah, maybe we will, yeah.
So it's like a job per 100 kilowatts
Right,
is about what it is. And so it's almost like it's going to take one person half a year to build a 50 kilowatt system.
yeah,
by himself, is kind of what it comes down to. Like, one person, so if it's one person per 100 kilowatts, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
And-
Now I understand what that means a little better.
And these numbers, again, are fairly conservative because we do have some real numbers as far as wind goes
Yeah.
in
Historical
Montana.
numbers.
Historical numbers for wind since 2005. And, if you broke down our current jobs in the wind industry into this, you'd get quite a bit more than this. But the reality is that the technology is improving, and as the technology improves, the capacity factors get higher.
Yeah.
And as the capacity factors get higher, especially for wind, the jobs actually decrease.
Sure, yep.
So,
Makes sense.
it's more
The same thing
efficient.
happened with farming, too.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about the same thing in agriculture, as the tractors became more powerful, smarter, you need fewer and fewer farmers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, so.
So every industry reflects this similar kind of trend, especially one that's as rapidly changing as the renewable energy industry. Even since, so Montana's largest wind farm is Judith Gap.
Yeah.
It's 135 megawatts. And that, the turbines on that wind farm are now, I don't believe they use those same turbines anymore. I think they're out.
The GE.
The GE.
Two megawatts.
Yeah, they're 1.5 actually.
1.5, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so they're not using that turbine anymore because
Mhm.
it's, and they still work just fine, but there's just better turbines since
Yeah,
then.
yeah.
And smarter turbines as far as, they can detect birds now and they're more advanced. So that's just an example of how the technology changes. So this study tries to take some of that into account. And so what we get is a total jobs per average megawatt. And this chart is helpful in understanding. You can kind of plug numbers in and say, what if we develop, this many average megawatts of each of these resources? And that's kind of what I did, and what was, more interesting to me than just this chart is kind of plugging it into realistic assumptions and industry projections for what we're going to see.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did for this chart. And the one thing to note is that Montana doesn't have any utility solar PV right now. And there are actually, I've researched quite a bit, and there's no studies that even say, Montana, you could develop this amount of utility scale solar PV. We do have the potential to do it. We are somewhat further north, and so
Yeah.
a lot of the studies that NREL has done are for states that are further south, but
Yeah.
we do have some potential, especially since there's none right
Now,
now.
when you say we have the potential, does that mean that, there's a few different ways to look at that. Obviously, there's land available, I think that's a problem. But is there, and what I keep hearing from Northwestern is like, there's not enough transmission capacity. Like, if you put a 1 megawatt utility grade PV system, you'd blow the whole grid off the map in Montana. Is that true?
I don't know if you'd blow the whole grid off the map. We are transmission constrained,
Okay.
and that is what is kind of causing a bottleneck, mostly in wind development. So we had this really, really fast increase in wind development from in the last 10 years. It
Yeah.
just, it's exponential growth.
Yeah.
And so we, but what's happening now is we're seeing is that, the transmission lines that are already built
Yeah.
are very, they're full. They're at
Okay.
capacity for
Okay.
the most part.
Yeah.
And so you either need to ramp down the generation that's currently using up those pathways, or you need to build new transmission lines. Or upgrade. Another option is upgrading the
Sure,
existing
of
transmission
course.
lines to increase their capacity. And so I don't know if that's necessarily the case. They sometimes tend to exaggerate things, but Yes, I think for any utility scale resource right now, we are somewhat transmission constrained, but,
Okay. So the myth is true.
Right.
I'm not out there with I don't have an amp meter on the
Right.
grid myself. I don't know, I have no way of verifying that, but,
right.
okay.
So some of this, is dependent upon other factors, and this study didn't say, this study didn't get into the barriers necessarily. It just said, if you were to develop this, then you get this. So this is the chart, and I just plugged some numbers in here. So I'm assuming in the next 20 years that we're going to have 12 average megawatts of solar PV.
Well, okay.
And 12 average megawatts is essentially 0.6% of Montana's current electricity load.
Yeah.
And we're right now at about 0.07% of our electricity load is coming from residential solar PV.
Yeah, so this extra 12 megawatts, now, is this going to be residential and utility, or you think that much utility might come online?
So it's 12 average megawatts. So
Yeah.
it's not 12 megawatts.
Right.
So, yeah, this is just residential.
Which is residential?
Yeah,
then? Okay,
yeah,
okay,
yeah,
gotcha,
yeah. So the 12 average megawatts, and I see there, I assume
Oh, yeah,
0.6%. And estimated retail sales in Montana in 2030 are estimated to be about 2,000 average megawatts for the state. And so 0.6% of that is 12 average megawatts. And then for utility scale solar PV, this one, again, was a little bit more difficult because there isn't any in place right now. But so what I did is just say, what if 1% of Montana's retail load in 20 years came from utility scale?
So 20 average megawatts is 1%,
Yeah,
okay?
of our projected retail sales. And so what I did was take current retail sales and projected a 1% growth rate, which is actually a little bit high for Montana, but that's pretty common. And then for wind, this is where your big numbers come from, because Montana has the second greatest wind potential in the country. And this comes from a study from the U.S. Department of Energy that predicted that 20%, they were just saying what if the U.S. were to get 20% of its energy from wind energy by 2030? And then looked at each state and each state's contribution to that. And for Montana, they said about 5,000 megawatts. And so 5,000 megawatts is about 2,100 average megawatts, and then you multiply that by the total job factors. And that's, this number, 3,150, it looks high, but this is the context that I wanted to provide is, so far, we've developed only about 650 megawatts of wind in Montana, and there's been about 1,800 jobs associated with that, if you include construction and operation and maintenance.
Those are pretty good numbers. It's higher than what I thought, okay.
So that's where the majority of jobs are coming from. And then the energy efficiency number that I used was, so the EPA's new carbon pollution guidelines for power plants, they say that Montana can reduce our carbon emissions by 21% by 2030, and that's Montana's goal. Each state has a different goal, and in order to do that, they assume an 11% gain in energy efficiency over the next 20 years for Montana, which is very conservative. We're already, so that's basically assuming, less than 1% a year, and we're already getting that without any policy related to energy
Now,
efficiency.
is this energy efficiency happening in the power plant or in the home? Where's the
It's in the home.
It's in the home.
Yeah.
That's what I was,
Yeah.
when she was explaining to us when he was outside of the room, the energy efficiency.
Yeah.
So it's the user who's able to live as comfortably, we assume,
Mhm.
keep the temperature the same in the house without using as much utility.
Right.
Okay.
And some of that's energy conservation, and energy efficiency is a little bit more technology focused, so it's not necessarily, it's a Prius versus driving less
Sure.
kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Mhm. Yeah.
So,
Or a programmable thermostat, just
Yeah.
leaving the thing on all the time.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And so a lot of that energy efficiency, it is behavioral, and so that's a little bit difficult to track.
Yeah.
But a lot of it does happen at the utility level. So Northwestern Energy's, they have programs for energy efficiency, and they can track that kind of thing.
Mhm.
They can track, how much savings they're getting. And it's a little bit difficult because, they give out rebates and some people throw them away and some people, would have bought the CFL light bulb anyways.
Yeah.
And so there's some difficulty in that. But energy efficiency, yeah, it's at the residential and then also commercial, so businesses as well, but not the plant.
Yeah.
Itself.
When we looked at efficiencies in plants, we teach from a couple different textbooks, and even some of these super high-tech coal-fired power plants that are doing heat
Mhm.
reclamation, all that. I mean, they're just they might squeeze out another percentage or two on their efficiency. They're so maxed out already.
Right.
So much engineering is going into these things to squeeze every good energy you can out of.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah, and they found that even the cleanest and the most efficient coal plants, like you said, they're really at their kind of maximum levels of efficiency.
Yeah.
And so, getting any more out, there's issues of, reducing pollution, and they have things called scrubbers. You
Yep.
can't scrub out CO2, and so,
Yep.
that's why a lot of people are talking about CCS now, carbon capture
Yeah,
sequestration.
yeah.
So, which is an interesting concept for sure.
Yeah.
You still, you kind of address the issue of the emissions, but then you still have the kind of the we call them the cradle issues of coal, which is the mining and stuff.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
anyways, but yes, so coal is kind of at that point, but EPA's rules, just as an example, they do assume, I believe, for Montana, a 6%. They call it within the fence line, so that's at the coal plant an efficiency increase. So they are saying that.
Hey, just for safety's sake, can you scroll over that battery? Because I'm afraid that I don't, what was it, 15 minutes? Okay, we'll make it.
Okay.
I got a new laptop, and the battery, I didn't bring my charger today, and this new battery's kind of wimpy, but I think we're doing all right.
So these are my own numbers. This
Yeah.
doesn't come from the report. It's important to note that. And we met with the author. Brad was.
Yeah.
We sat down with the author of the report, and he makes sure that I say that this is my own numbers.
Yeah,
'Cause
remind me his name again?
Tyler.
Tyler, yeah.
Yeah.
He was a good guy to meet with.
Yeah, so that's, and then the other chart that I have from this report is an interesting way to look at it as well, especially for energy efficiency, because energy efficiency is one of those things, like I said, you have a business who does HVAC or insulation, you don't automatically think of a ton of jobs associated with that. Well, one of the benefits of energy efficiency is that can happen at every household and every business, if you're just looking in Montana, in every city. And so as you invest more money, the more jobs there are going to be associated with that. So the more money you put into energy efficiency, whether it's through programs or measures, the more jobs you're going to get. And those can happen all over the state, versus some of the traditional fuels, where that's happening in one location. Even wind energy, although wind is more geographically dispersed than some traditional fuels as well. So this is jobs per $1 million in spending per capital invested. And you can see that energy efficiency, you get a lot of bang for your buck,
Just
essentially.
because
So you're
someone's
getting
back there kind of like programming the smart grid stuff. and-
Right,
Yeah.
right. And as you invest more money, and energy efficiency, again, is one of those resources that there's I'm trying to think of the word. So there's a lot that can happen if you spend just a little bit of money, like light bulbs, but then like you're talking about smart grid, you get into spending millions and millions of dollars on appliances and smart technology. You're really getting a lot of jobs as you move up that kind of scale of expense
Sure.
for those energy
And
efficiency
there's
measures.
higher paying jobs too, right? Because now someone's got to like sit in Seattle and program Lynn Horizon's Tesla for him here and
Right.
while this Tesla absorbs the surges and prevents the brownouts, so, yeah.
So that's another way to look at it, that you can see where energy efficiency is really the winner there.
Yeah.
And so, every time we see sort of something where somebody comes out with, we're going to put $10 billion into, I'm going to use carbon capture as an example, but
Yeah.
carbon capture and sequestration,
Yeah.
not that I'm saying that's totally not worthwhile, but that if you were to put even half of that in energy efficiency, you'd get quite a bit of
Yeah.
investment, then you'd get quite a bit of jobs out of that as well. So that's another important way to look at the job numbers for this report. The report kind of gives a little bit more background on Montana's, and you can see I didn't create a PowerPoint, but there's this picture on page 8 that kind of shows Montana's wind resource, which
yeah.
you've probably seen.
Here, we can do it this way. Just hold it nice and close there. Okay, that's good.
And so, you can see where the purple to red to orange areas, those are your really good wind resource. So here in Missoula, not the best wind resource in the state.
Sure, but out there on the plains though.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the majority of the state. So anything kind of east of the Continental Divide, we're looking at some great potential there. And energy efficiency, Montana, again, has a lot of potential because we currently don't have a lot of the programs and policies that a lot of other states have. So the ACEEE, the American Council on Energy Efficient Economy, I think Montana ranks 29th among states for our energy efficiency spending and programs. And so there's a lot of, the term is low-hanging fruit. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit for Montana in that area.
Yeah, well, check out Vermont, huh?
I know. Those northeast states are way ahead of the game. I believe it's maybe it's Vermont. One of the northeast states doesn't even have to do anything to comply with EPA's rules
Oh, wow.
because they,
They've got it figured out
yeah,
already.
they've got it figured out.
Yeah.
So that's pretty impressive. So that's, and then this talks about the cost assumptions, which if you're interested in kind of getting into the more granular level data, they go into some of their cost assumptions, which is helpful if you're, to see what numbers they were using to get the jobs per average megawatt. And cost of the technology, not cost of the delivered energy. That's important to point out. For the labor, for the job numbers, they use cost of the technology. So, yeah, that's an overview of the report.
And Tyler really, he needs to spend some time on this thing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we have been working with them since January.
Okay.
And
Is this
so
all he was doing for a half a year then, basically, or?
they have a couple other things that they work on. So, but yeah, this was one of their big their big projects that they were working on. So.
And then did you, obviously he must have made some money doing this. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and then where did the money come from, though? I'm just curious, because, I know you're a nonprofit, like, how's the money flow through the system here?
So we the money for this we got a grant from the Energy Foundation. I don't know if you've.
I don't know that energy.
Okay, they're big funder of renewable energy policy and also work related to coal. And I believe that they're based out of San Francisco.
Okay.
And some of their money gets diverted like through the Hewlett. There's Hewlett money, and so Hewlett Packard, and also there's something called the Western Clean Energy Campaign. So,
nice, okay.
yeah, so that's where a lot of it came from. In the Sierra Club, a lot of their work related to energy comes from Michael Bloomberg.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah.
Yep. So the former mayor of New
Sure,
York,
yeah.
I think he gave Sierra Club $50 million or something for their work.
I
So
should say I've heard of him doing such things.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. No longer the mayor, but
Yeah.
still doing
Yep.
things like that. So yeah, that's where it came from. We try to partner with larger organizations on things like this, just for their staffing and expertise. So Sierra Club provided some assistance there. So that's the report, and I'm happy to answer questions now, or if you have questions.
What are your next two
And so
slides?
the next two slides I was going to get into talking a little bit more. Oh, I wish I
We're
should.
gonna hit F5. We're gonna hit the F5 button on that one.
So I wanted to get, I wanted to just discuss, I think you had mentioned talking a little bit about the cost, so the cost to the consumer. And this is the best, if you've ever seen anything by Lazard, he puts out these reports, I believe every year, every couple years, on the levelized cost of energy and comparing different technologies. And so this is unsubsidized, so it's a good way to compare it. Obviously, if you're going to put subsidies in there, you put subsidies for all of these resources.
Yeah.
And you can see that solar PV on a per megawatt basis. So the levelized cost of energy, I'll back up a little bit, is the best way to compare the cost of each of these resources. So there's so many different ways to look at costs. This is the best way to do an apples to apples comparison,
Yeah.
because you are including all the capital expenditures up front. You exclude all the subsidies, which can be a little bit difficult task to take out. But the levelized cost of energy is the accepted way to compare these resources. And so he looked at different technologies, and he looked at the actual costs of these, and I believe this is just for the U.S. And so he looked at.
That's way better than what I thought. I mean, look, I mean, they're right there in the ballpark. I mean, they're all.
Right.
Oh.
So wind, obviously, wind is actually less on this basis than some of the traditional fuels. And yep, gas combined cycle is very low right now, but that fluctuates pretty heavily. Wind, once you lock in a contract for wind at a price, you're going to keep that price for the lifetime of that resource. And so wind is very competitive. I mean, energy efficiency is is the least expensive, always will be. And solar PV, rooftop, I probably should have put another slide comparing, a couple of years prior, because it's actually come down significantly. It was, it was higher than 200. And so that's just decreasing significantly. I think costs have decreased in solar PV in the last 30 years by 40% or something.
Yeah, I believe that.
Crazy like that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you talk to people who put up systems even just a few years ago, and they're like, you put up your system for, $7,000. Mine costs twice that, and it's half the
same
size.
with laptop computers. I'm really surprised by this battery storage versus the diesel generator. That is surprising to me. I would have guessed those would be flip-flopped.
Would you? Yeah. That's pretty amazing. And this battery storage technology is the other thing that's really taking off and actually works very well with the solar PV application. And you mentioned Tesla. That's really going to drive the battery market. And I know that the California just passed a law requiring 4,000 megawatts of storage, all coming from battery technology. And
Megawatt hours of storage, maybe.
I think just megawatts.
So the storage has to be able to pull in 4,000 megawatts. It just has to sit there and suck that up.
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. And so,
Well, could be capacitors too, yeah.
and that's the
Yeah.
question that a lot of people said is, do we have the technology to meet this policy?
Yeah.
And their legislature said, we don't care. We're going to pass this law. And then
The Mountain legislature, Trump knows of physics and technology.
Right. It often does. We don't care about science. Go out and find it. So there's this huge rush now to meet this huge storage market that's just opened up in California. So I think this chart is from before they passed that requirement. And what was driving their whole interest in it is, so the San Onofre nuclear generating station, it's over 2,000 megawatt nuclear generating station. It went completely offline. They just they shut it off.
They didn't need it.
Well,
No.
I don't know if they needed it, but it was
They
the
decided-
consumer saying
Screw that thing.
Screw that.
No Fukushima.
Yeah, ever since
California
Fukushima.
kids. Okay,
Yeah.
wow, yeah.
Yeah, which, some of that is a lot of what happens with nuclear is fear-based and happens because of that. So they were seeing a significant, gap in their, in what they can generate and provide.
Yeah.
And so they are trying to fill that, and then looking at the growth in rooftop solar, dramatic growth in rooftop solar, they were realizing that there needed to be the storage component because obviously times of day when solar's not producing. So that's what's driving that market. But this is just an interesting, this is a comparison for each of these technologies, and something that is often changing, and almost even just for the reference. So you can just Google this, and even looking at each of these reports over the last few years,
Numbers are going all.
the numbers are changing. Coal is
So it's not simple.
going up.
I told Adam it wasn't simple at all, and I think we were.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first question we asked the first day of class, like, how does energy priced? And I'm like, oh, God.
Yeah,
it's.
it's amazing. It's so many factors, and you go into some of these utility commission and rate cases, and the term cost is, there's avoided cost, there's actual cost, but actual cost is an actual cost, and so it's kind of interesting.
Person or organization?
So I think there's a few authors. This is one person, but yeah, his is whenever anybody says, oh, levelized cost of energy, they say, oh, that's the Lazard, analysis. And
Maybe hit page down, do you have one more slide, or?
page down?
Yeah, over on the right there. Is that your last?
Yeah, this is my last one.
Okay.
So this is for Northwestern Energy in Montana, and this data comes from actual dockets, rate cases filed at the Public Service Commission for each of these resources. And so when Northwestern Energy wants to get a resource, they call it put into rate base, so ratepayers are going to be paying for it.
Yeah.
They have to come in with their cost. And this is the cost delivered to the consumer of each of these resources. And you can see,
So start with Colstrip at 6 cents per kilowatt hour.
yep, so $60 a megawatt hour.
Yep.
And then the interesting thing is this is
I see
Judith
Gap
Gap
much cheaper.
is already much cheaper, and this is Spine which is a wind farm as well. That's outside of Great Falls. That's
Okay, yeah.
40 megawatt. That's Northwestern's newest wind farm, and that's 3 cents. 3.3 cents. So this is just demonstrating exactly that, which is that Colstrip is, it's almost twice as expensive as those two wind resources already.
Now, is that because they're still trying to pay down the capital and what it costs to build the thing, or where's that money? I mean, it's going somewhere.
So some of it's that, and because Northwestern has an interesting, or Colstrip itself has an interesting ownership structure, like I mentioned. So a lot of West Coast utilities have the majority ownership in it. PP&L has some ownership in it. So PP&L isn't a regulated utility. They're a power marketer. So they're not regulated, but they own part of Colstrip, and so some of that's paying PP&L, some of that's for the actual, costs of the production.
Yeah.
So this is just the delivered cost to the consumer. This is, everything all in, and a lot of people will ask, well, does Judith Gap include the integration costs? Because they call it integration, where, it's not blowing all the time, and so you have to have some natural gas, right? That's what they use right now to back it up. But this I just say is the all-in cost to the consumer. So this is when you get your power bill, this is, what you're paying on a kilowatt hour basis for each of these resources.
Tell me what the short-term fixed is in the spot market.
Yeah. So the spot market is just when Northwestern Energy, they are short on power and they need to just go to the market and say, we need this chunk of power, and they usually do it day ahead. And they just buy it in, I think it's in like 10 megawatt chunks, I want to say, or 100 megawatt chunks. And then and so right now the spot market is really low, one, because of natural gas, and then two, because of wind. Because wind is, the spot market is based on what they call a marginal unit of power, which is your next amount of power that you need beyond your average energy. And right now, the marginal unit are primarily wind units.
And is that because it would just be a dump load otherwise? Because there's just, or I guess I'm not quite following. Where's the wind coming from? It's not coming from Montana. It's coming from.
It's all bundled together. And so right now, Montana, the primary market that we buy into is called the Mid-Columbia. So it's actually in, it's like Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and it gets bundled, and then they can sell.
Now, how would Northwestern Energy know a day ahead that they're going to need more electricity tomorrow?
Usually they do based on patterns, and they have at their, and this is fascinating, if you ever get a chance, you should go to Butte and see they call it their real-time desk.
Oh, yeah.
And they have just a guy sitting at a computer and they got, a picture of Colstrip, a picture of Judith Gap, and how much energy they're producing. And
this is Northwestern Energy.
It's their.
Predicting a big cold front coming out from the north tomorrow. So hey, whoa, this didn't happen last year.
That makes sense, though, right?
Yep.
So they're looking at weather patterns too.
They look at weather patterns.
Football games coming on,
Yeah, historical trends. I mean, energy is one of those things that's not totally predictable, but enough to where unless there's crazy things that happen, which are happening more and more, but crazy things that happen where they can usually do it day ahead.
Yeah.
And so that's what the spot market is, and they can go out and say, oh, we're going to need this much power, where can we buy it? And they, the guy gets on the phone, and, it's kind of like a mini, stock market. Yeah, exactly.
Trading floor,
Yeah, trading floor. So.
And the short-term fixed is what?
So the short-term fixed price, that is, that Northwestern buys those contracts ahead of time, but for a shorter amount of time than their, so PP&L is an example of a long-term contract.
Mm-hmm.
That's a contract.
Yeah.
And that, so they don't own, this they don't own,
Right.
this they don't own.
Okay.
They own this, and these two.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
these aren't actual owned resources, but they are contracts that they say, and it's just for, usually the short-term fixed, I believe, are about 5 years.
Mhm.
And then your PP&L contract is closer to 10 years.
Yeah. I guess what's struggling is the spot market is cheaper than anything else. I would have thought like, hey man, I really need some energy tomorrow. Oh, it's gonna cost you. You know,
Right.
I'd almost think the spot market would be on the other end of that histogram. It's not.
That seems logical, and so that's the risky part of this, is that that's like that right now because of factors that are likely to change. And so that spot market is driving a lot of the decisions to say, we want to own more resources, because yes, it's low right now, but if we're reliant on that, and like you said, in the future, it could be the case where they're saying it's going to cost you. And it fluctuates so much. And so it's just like insurance, where you are risk averse and you want to build in, that certainty. And so you do that by buying resources, which may cost you right now, but in the long term, it's going to end up being, cheaper. So it's just an interesting analysis. So this is a QF, means a qualifying facility. And QF Tier 2, that's kind of interesting because QF Tier 2 are actually, so a qualifying facility is a facility that somebody else owns that resource, and they are smaller resources that they sell that power to Northwestern Energy. So that's kind of similar to a contract, but there's a federal law called Public Utility Regulatory Policy Act, PURPA, passed in 1976. It requires utilities to buy, if there's alternative technology, it requires the utility to buy a certain amount at a certain price.
Is that part of what's driving this dam purchase?
Yeah.
It is?
Yeah, somewhat. Yeah, in some ways. I mean,
Well, the hydro is PPL, isn't it?
Yeah, so PP&L, that's an interesting thing too, because PP&L owns the hydro right now. They're selling it to Northwestern. This PP&L, Pennsylvania Power and Light owns facilities in the UK. They own facilities in the East Coast of the United States. So that contract is like a bundle, and you know that it's probably mostly hydro and coal, but you don't know how much of what is which. Just like the spot market, except you probably have a better idea with PP&L. It's whatever they own. So to some extent we're already kind of paying for it, and then and then we're going to pay for it. But Northwestern's going to own it. They're regulated. There's some advantages to that. So the qualifying facility Tier 2 qualifying facilities are an interesting. There's 2 facilities in Montana. There's Colstrip Energy Limited Partnership. That's a waste coal burning facility. It came in under PURPA, which we would argue it probably shouldn't have, because they say renewable or alternative. And then Yellowstone Energy Limited Partnership in Billings, which is a waste petroleum coke burning facility. So that's the most expensive.
Huh. Is that because there's more technology to burn these wastes cleanly? Is that the deal?
Yeah,
They're both carbon. It's carbon.
It's carbon,
Yeah,
and those are old. And I don't know if those would get in right now under that law, but they were kind of grandfathered in.
Food gas.
Yeah. And so, Yelp, so Yellowstone Energy, we call them Kelp and Yelp. Yelp is in Billings. You can see that. You can see it off the interstate. It's
A plume, is it just?
Yeah. So there's the Correct coal plant in Billings. That's on one side of the interstate, and then on the other side, it's kind of in the industrial area. But and so then qualifying facility 1 contracts. Those are wind.
Mm-hmm.
Those are wind qualifying facilities. So there's
Existing, obviously.
yeah. So there's a few of those, and what they do is they come to the utility, and the utility and the whoever owns the facility negotiate a price at which they will buy their power. And so the wind qualifying facilities are actually less. And there's, the largest one, I believe, the largest QF is 10 megawatts, a wind farm in Judith Gap, I believe, Martinsdale area. So, yeah.
Gosh, that's really good data. I'm really glad you came today.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I mean, this is all, and this is something that, we've been looking at because I don't think a lot of people understand necessarily how their power bill breaks out. Once if the dam purchase goes through, then, the dams will show up under here. And so this PP&L contract ends, I believe, next year, which, they won't need it anymore because they're filling this gap with the hydros is what they're expected to do. And they're also going to fill some of this with the hydros as well.
Well, the short-term fix is more, you said contract to come out, fix the hole in the dam, it's, operation and maintenance. Wouldn't that be more contract-wise? And the short-term fix, it's more operational and maintenance.
Well, no, I think the fixed just refers to the fixed price that you
Yeah.
have over a year to 4 year period.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's and how much of that, some of that's coming from out of state though, too, the short-term
Mhm.
fixed,
Yeah. Yeah, that's just wherever, and I think there's confidentiality things on that, but
Sure.
it's wherever Northwestern has, and you're right about the fixed, so you lock it in at a price. So you're getting some guarantee there, but you can't get a guarantee beyond, a certain amount of years.
Yeah. And I think Kent, when Kent Swift comes in on Friday, I think he does the economics of this across the board. I think he might be able to dial it in for us a little better too. So.
Yeah, and I actually have the whole Public Service Commission report that this is a part of a whole kind of. There's several really interesting charts associated with this, like what Northwestern Energy Supply looks like, and I can send those to you.
Do I have an electronic copy of this report too? I think, did you give that?
I can't remember, but
I really like providing stuff like this on our website.
Sure.
I'm sure it's on someone else's website, but I just put little links, especially if there's jobs involved, and then, prospective students, I just check out these links.
yeah.
This is your future. It's your crystal ball right here.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah.
It's murky as it might be, that's the ball we got.
Yeah, it's hard to predict the future. I mean, if we have our way, there'll be a lot more jobs in the future associated with, cleaner technologies. But this addresses. I just thought that the jobs issue and the cost issue were both the key issues when it comes to energy that people ask about. And so this gets at some of that.
Yeah, that's perfect.
And
I think, well, can you hit escape really quick? Computer, and then, let's see this little function. Ding. Oh, can you mouse over the battery one more time? I think we're about to die. I don't want to lose my. Yeah, I'm gonna have to quit
Okay.
the recording,
That's
but we can
fine.
take a couple more questions.
yeah.
Yeah, an hour. That's about the limit, it